My parents hired a private detective just so they could follow my every move and make sure that I'm still following their house rules despite the fact that I'm 25 years old. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, so to start things out, I'm in my late 20s and I live on my own and have my own car. My parents are super strict and made me miss out on the college experience, which I am still bitter about. I come from a family of extroverted people, such as my cousin who is also accomplished career-wise, but still throws parties with around 70 people. She got to have the whole exciting college experience involving large social events and pursuit of creative passions, and now she has fun alongside her career. She also wrote and starred in her own musicals, and I have a similar passion for acting that I've never even gotten to pursue. I got the similar genes of being fun-loving, creatively passionate, and wanting to enjoy my life. Well, I moved out at 25 to make up for what I've missed out on and to at least try and enjoy my current freedom. The years after moving out have been the best years of my life. However, my parents still make me feel restricted. They literally hired detectives to remotely tap into my phone as well as read my text messages. They found out I was staying over at a friend's house and they got so mad that they threatened to show up to the friend's house just to tell her to leave me alone. They're also tracking my car because they know when I'm out late and then they scold me for it. I can probably find the tracker and remove it, but the detectives part worries me since they're able to do this without a tracker. So how should I even begin to stop this? Should I say I'm gonna reduce in-person time with them from once a week to once every 2 weeks? I mean, they got really mad when I suggested that before because even with weekly visits, they miss me too much. I feel sad because I'm missing out socially and romantically as they still manage to enforce their rules of don't go out after sunset, as well as don't have sleepovers and don't go out on the weekends. Instead, they want me in at 5:30 and they want me to focus on my work. I would love to meet and organically form a romantic connection with somebody, but my opportunity to meet new people is restricted since after work, weekend times after dark, and the once a week day that they see me are all off limits for socializing. So honestly, I'm at such a loss and I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, this is literally an insane story because your family is stalking you. They are hiring private investigators to stalk and follow your every move, as well as tap into your phone calls and text messages. Like seriously, my guy, this is not okay. They are literally trying to control your life even though you moved out. So if I was in your shoes, I would be going to the police. This is not normal behavior. Like I would understand if a parent was concerned about their kid moving out or something like that, but this is insane behavior. This is not okay. This is not them worrying about you and what you're doing. This is them literally trying to control every aspect of your life. And that is incredibly creepy. There is no good excuse for this. So yeah, I would call the police and get them involved. And I would also go to some like auto shop of some kind and explain to them exactly what's going on and maybe pay to see if they can find any kind of tracker on your car. Because what you're describing right now is insanely scary and this is not normal behavior. Like they're even going as far as like tracking who you're talking to and how late you're staying out. Like I'm kind of surprised you haven't blocked these people at this point and told them to get lost and pound some sand. Like you're 25 years old, you don't have to explain anything to these people. So honestly, with all things considered, I really hope you're able to get away from your parents and you're able to get to the bottom of all this craziness because this behavior is not normal in the slightest. And I just think it would be a mistake to let this slide and do nothing about it. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My wife has an annual trip every single year that she goes on by herself. And after seeing this happen for so many years, I'm starting to question why she's going on this trip in the first place without also inviting her husband. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my wife loves to travel, but I do not. I don't hate it, but I find it stressful and flying makes me incredibly anxious. My wife, on the other hand, has traveled all over the place, lived in multiple countries, and is always planning the next big adventure. This really hasn't been an issue for us. I do travel with my wife probably once or twice a year, usually staying a little bit closer to home. Otherwise, she travels with her friends and family. She always invites me on these trips, but I rarely go. And while I miss having her around, it is a good arrangement. She gets to do something that she loves, and I get some alone time to unwind at home. She'll send pictures and we'll FaceTime, and she usually brings me back some cool souvenirs. Now, all of this is to say there's one trip she makes every single year that I'm starting to get really uncomfortable with. She goes by herself to the same place every year, and it is non-negotiable. When she's there, I hear from her way less than any other trip. She'll send pictures and we do FaceTime, but it is a lot less often. When she gets back, she'll give me snippets of information, but I don't get a full day-by-day rundown. Now, this trip predates me. She first went to this place in college and has been back basically every year since. She's told me several times how much this place means to her, but I personally have a lot of problems with this. For starters, the trip is non-negotiable. She's had lots of trips change or get canceled canceled or not materialize, but this one never does that. It is always going to happen. I'm also not invited, and it feels very secretive, like she doesn't want to share it with me. And this place isn't exactly a tourist hotspot. It's not what you would think is a vacation destination, and there aren't a lot of sights to see, even according to my wife. So why does she feel the need to go back 10 years in a row if there's not that much to do? I've brought it up to my wife, but she can't see where I'm coming from. The issue being that we have the money and that we have time off of work, and we still have a great relationship outside of all of this. I even asked if I could come along sometime, but she accused me of only wanting to go so that I could keep tabs on her, because I, under any other circumstance, would have no interest in going to this place. So, according to her, it's either my insecurity or my ego that's trying to keep her from her passion. Now, I get where she's coming from, but it also seems crazy to me to be deliberately unwilling to include your spouse in something like this. So honestly, am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? I don't necessarily think you're the jerk in this situation, but I do think it's probably safe to mind your own business. Like, this trip is something that has been going on well before your wife met you, and it's something that she enjoys to do every single year. Like, there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. It doesn't sound like there's any kind of like nefarious things going on, and I'm willing to assume that there's no hints of her like cheating on you or anything like that. So personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with her going on a solo trip every single year. Also, the way she spoke to you really makes me believe that maybe you do keep tabs on her way too much. Like, I know if I was in your shoes and my significant other said something like that, where they thought I was monitoring them way too much or something like that, I would do some serious self-reflection and be like, wait, am I actually doing that? Because maybe this is a situation where you might be a little too obsessed in what she is and isn't doing. And maybe this is a wake-up call to like take a step back and not be so overly involved and like overbearing. And maybe that's not what's going on here. This is just an honest observation. So hopefully you can figure this out, because honestly, I don't see this as nearly as big of a deal as you're making it. And if your wife seriously wants to go on a private trip every single year, then I think it's completely reasonable to just let her do it. Today, I messed up by almost losing my job and my mentorship over a silly joke. Here's what happened. So this story happened back in 2002. For a small backstory, being physically disabled, I've beat the odds many times in my life. I also grew up in an extremely hostile family and was told that I would never amount to much of anything. And this will be important to know going into the story, because it contributed to how big of a mess up I potentially made. I am blessed to have had two grandparents who believed in me even when they didn't have a reason to, and that's why I ended up with this opportunity. When I graduated high school, my parents made it clear that they did not think I would live long enough to make use of a college education due to my various health-related challenges, and thus I was on my own to figure out what to do for a career. Growing up with a disability, I always had a fascination with motivation and psychology, and growing up in a hostile environment, abnormal psychology was definitely a particular interest. My grandfather, who to be fair is one of the smartest and most positive men I've ever known, would regularly peruse the local newspaper and found that there was a local job in health-related research that was run by the head of the psychology department at a local university. My grandfather encouraged me to apply because the advertisement said that there were multiple jobs available. It also said that a mentorship was available in certain situations, which my father said would be an awesome opportunity. I got the job a few weeks later and apparently had impressed the person who was doing the interviewing, because on my second day at the job, I met the director of the entire project, who also happened to be a research-based psychologist who had received international recognition. Apparently, I conducted myself well, and he took an interest in me because we had about a 2-hour conversation upon our first meeting. The job itself was conducting research surveys on a variety of topics via the phone, so it's basically a government-funded telemarketing thing. I was originally brought in for one project, but within a matter of months, I was transferred under the director of the facility to work on a senior citizen project. Completion of an individual survey in the senior citizen project usually took about somewhere between 10 to 25 minutes. I've always had the gift of speaking well, and there were only about 10 to 12 of the staff of 80 working on this particular project. When I was selected for the project, this led to me working at least a few days a week directly with the professor, which led to him offering the mentorship over multiple years, which means I got to learn more about the science of behavioral change from somebody who was nationally recognized. But unfortunately, this is where my mess up begins. Now, normally we were on 4-hour shifts for this particular project because dealing with people who had a good bit of hearing loss and other misunderstandings sometimes would be draining, so we would switch working different projects. I had been asked to cover someone's shift later in the day, which means that I was going to put in what amounted to a 10-hour day on the phone, with at least 6 of those hours being senior citizen-related project work. There was a policy that if a person responding to the survey was difficult, we could flag a supervisor and have them give us permission to terminate the phone call or continue on another day, and this will be important later on. I was going through the day and had 7 surveys completed and was starting to get a little tired. Well, this girl I was crushing on, who happened happened to be my coworker, invited me to hang out after work. So needless to say, I was exceedingly excited about the prospects that waited my young 20-something-year-old self at the end of my shift. Well, that is until everything started going downhill. I was put on the phone with a respondent who was in her 90s at approximately 30 minutes before the shift was to end. The first thing that she says to me is that she had broken her hearing aids earlier in the day and that they were not charging correctly, but I confidently let her know that I could be patient and repeat everything that she needed repeated. And well, when I said that, this was honestly the beginning of my doom. It was clear to me within the first 10 minutes of our phone call that I was going to need to repeat about every sentence that I needed to say to this woman. This led to me maybe coming off as exceedingly frustrated as I looked at the clock and realized I was going to have to put in overtime, and it was also very clear that she did not want to continue the call on another day when her hearing aids were going to be more functional. Now, keep in mind, I was 9 hours into a shift when this began, and I was really ready to go home. I dutifully handed my crush a note to go flag down a supervisor, and I thought I would be given permission to reschedule the phone call. But the trouble is that it was the supervisor's decision on whether we would be allowed to terminate for another day or not. And unfortunately, the supervisor making that decision on this day was somebody who did not like me, all because I got the final mentorship spot with the professor, and her daughter had applied for the same position, so she had a bit of a grudge against me to say the very least. Well, the shifts had ended, and I was still plugging away, at which point the girl I was supposed to go to dinner with wrote me a note and asked me how much longer I was going to be. I quickly scribbled something that no one could read, and I went about my business. Back on the line, this older lady had proceeded to begin washing her dishes, making it even more difficult to hear, but there was no relief coming from my supervisor. Now, the mess up had finally arrived, and my colleague said that she didn't understand what I had written. I then quickly hit what I thought was the mute button, but instead it was the call merge button, as they were right next to each other, and I then turned to my crush, and I jokingly said that I wasn't sure who was going to pass away first, this woman's hearing aid or the woman herself. Now, knowing that whatever higher power you may believe in has a sense of humor, I'm sure you can guess what happened next. This older woman suddenly got the hearing of an owl and heard my ill-timed joke that I said to my friend. She then proceeded to start yelling at me for having the manners of a heathen and the training of a hillbilly to wish that she would pass away. Now, no matter how hard I tried to explain, she now could suddenly hear everything, but still simply did not want to use her ears, and instead she proceeded to ask for the name of my direct supervisor, as well as the person running the project, and that she was going to call and complain about me the next day. She then slammed the phone in my ear, and I received a lecture from the supervisor who did not let me end the call. Now, as you can imagine, dinner was ruined, and we did not go out and have a good time like I had planned, but instead I spent the next 24 hours or so concerned that I was about to lose my mentorship and my job. 2 days later, the director of the project and the professor who was mentoring me called me into his office. He then proceeded to play back about 10 minutes of the phone call before letting me say anything to defend myself. He then asked me to answer one question for him. He asked me how I lasted that long and why I had not alerted my supervisor to this problem, because he had spent about 90 minutes earlier in the day talking with this woman about my poor conduct. Now, I was sure I was about to get fired, but instead he said that I don't get paid enough for this stuff and that I handle that like someone with professional training. He did admonish me to make sure I hit the mute button instead of the merge button next time, and that I might want to consider taking shorter shifts on days that I had to work the senior project. Well, it turns out that I didn't know that this entire call had been recorded as part of our quality control, and he was able to legitimize that I hadn't done anything wrong. And from then on, I was no longer able to be on the same shift with the supervisor who refused to end that call. Needless to say, I never expected that a 15-second joke could have cost me one of the most important professional relationships of my life. Yeah, I'm sure that was like super stressful on the day of, because you were convinced, yeah, I'm about to lose my job, and all over a stupid joke. Like seriously, that supervisor really should have stepped in. So good for you for keeping your job and at least having a manager who has some brains inside of their body, because if you got fired for that, that honestly would have been absolutely awful. An entitled Karen makes my job a living nightmare as she picks up her to-go order right when our kitchen was about to close, and I've honestly never been more annoyed by somebody in my life. Here's what happened. 2 nights ago, a customer calls for a to-go order. My boss, manager, and owner answers the phone, and the customer asks for a very specific taco that isn't on our menu. But my boss, knowing how to make them, he decided to go out of their way to make them for the customer. The boss explains the ticket to me because I've never heard of that kind of taco before, and told me that he decided to start introducing new items on the menu just to try and stay in the game. So he clearly wanted to keep up with the 2 other Mexican restaurants in the area that I work in. So the order is ready, and the boss told the customer that the order would be ready within 10 to 15 minutes. And so we start to wait. After 20 minutes, the customer doesn't show up. Then 40 minutes pass and the customer is still nowhere to be found. Then 1 hour passes and then 2 hours. And of course, my boss isn't pleased pleased with the customer because they put in all that extra time and effort for those tacos all for nothing. 1 minute before closing, the customer calls in and she wants her order. So I explained that her order had been sitting there for hours and that the kitchen is already closed and that we couldn't get her new tacos. She says it's okay and she wants them, and then she pulls in. To make sure I'm not making a mistake by selling those tacos, I asked my boss and he told me that it was okay. Now keep in mind, I'm in Missouri and it was freezing cold outside. Since we offer curbside pickup, we have to take the food outside to the parking lot. Now tell me why this idiot takes her time on her phone, texting and making numbers on the calculator, and then back to texting someone instead of getting the stupid card so that she could pay. I mean, I thought my thoughts were gonna freeze over before she even pays for her food. I see her acting kinda sketchy because she would be on her phone and then reach for her purse, and then she would reach for the steering wheel and then back to her phone. She grabbed something that looked like a card and extended her hand to give it to me in exchange for her food. But instead, she grabs the bag and starts opening the food without giving me the card. In my head, I was thinking, this idiot is gonna act like something's wrong with her food after she took so long to pick it up? Like, are you kidding me right now? She then dismisses the bag, looks at her phone, and again kind of reaches for the steering wheel and backs out. Then she asked me for a side of guacamole and sour cream. Now, at this point, the kitchen had been dismantled about 40 minutes ago for the weekly deep cleaning, and I had already told her over the phone that the restaurant was closed. So no, you can't get that. The kitchen is no longer in service for a while now. She then let out a deep breath and resigned, giving me her card. I go and cash her out, and when I'm back, she had her food spread all over the open passenger seat. I gave the card to her, and she did not even tip me as she went along her merry way. Now, it wasn't until after I was telling this story to my sister when I got home that I realized she probably was trying to run away without paying, and asking me for the side orders was her way of achieving that. But little does she know that if I could have gotten the side orders, I would have taken the bag with her food with me with the excuse of putting the sides in her bag, just so I don't give her more bags to carry, thus making things supposedly easier for her. But in reality, she was probably trying to pull some weird scam on me to try and steal the food when I went into the restaurant. Yeah, that's honestly super annoying across the board. Not only was this lady asking for items on the menu that didn't exist, but your boss, instead of telling her to take a hike and be like, no, we don't have that, what are you talking about? He decides that no, we're gonna go above and beyond and we're gonna make those tacos, even though they're literally not on the menu. Like seriously, that is just annoying for everybody involved. Because in my opinion, if you do it for one customer, trust me, it's gonna happen for others. And that's a really weird precedent to set for your employees to have to deal with. Like customer service is already like a coin flip as it is. You either have good people that come in and they treat you with respect, or they're just neutral, or you have people who are completely belligerent, or they're rude, or they're trying to steal from you like the lady from this story, which by the way, that's exactly what she was trying to do. You cannot convince me otherwise that she wasn't trying to scam you out of that food. And I'm also kind of convinced that she was stalling just to try and freeze you out. Like you pretty much picked up on this right away because she was clearly trying to like take her time and really make you miserable as she was supposedly looking through her phone and trying to get her card together. And that is honestly so rude and disturbing to do to somebody. Like there's no good reason for that. And she also waited for her food for like well over 2 hours. Like who in their right mind would want those tacos after that? It's probably gonna be like this weird soggy mess and it's not gonna be good at all. Like that really does sound disgusting. So across the board, this really sounds like a miserable thing to deal with, and I seriously hope you never have to put up with that ever again. Whether that's your boss putting new items on the menu all of a sudden, or even this weird Karen trying to steal this food from you in the middle of a snowstorm. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.